bowling ball going back and forth in a line from you to me.
You are a conspiracy theorist, Marcus. And that's the point that I wrote down because I want to just divert a little bit here. Conspiracy theorist is very interesting. It used to be a very easy cop out for people that want to question the work that you and I and others are doing. You're a conspiracy theorist. You see, that really works well because, as you know, we both know where conspiracy theorists came from. I'll let you speak to that in a second. And without getting into the details of the last couple of years, because we have to watch the censors, conspiracy.
Hello, censors. Hello, censors.
Hello, censors. Conspiracy theorists have now become almost a go-to source for a lot more people. And a lot more people in the last couple of years are now taking conspiracy theorists as number one conspiracy facts. And they're now taking people who look into conspiracies and write about conspiracies very, very seriously because now they themselves are questioning the official narrative in a lot of what has been going on. And I think the last 2 years has really, really opened a lot of people's eyes and has brought them to this level now up here where they're saying, wait, hold on a minute. I think Marcus Allen might have a point here. Wait a minute. Hold on a minute. Oh, hey, Randy might have a point. Maybe Robert Williams. I need to look into this a little bit more. And we're finding that now. And I'm actually seeing some comical tweets. But there's some truth to it that say, the next time this happens, run to your nearest conspiracy theorist quickly, right? Yes. And there's a lot of truth in that. And I don't, I'm finding a lot of people just in my own local community, and I love to gauge where the world is going by your local community. Marcus, I'm seeing a lot of anger out there. A lot of anger. I'm seeing incredible levels of anger from people I've never seen this before, from people I would never imagine would be that angry. Something's happening. And they're now taking another look at the conspiracy theorists and saying, you know what? If you'd have told me, Marcus, 2-3 years ago, what was going to happen, that we were going to, the government was going to do this, and this in the last 2 years, I would have laughed.
Yeah.
But it happened. And that has opened a lot of people's eyes. And someday I'm going to write about it, but not now, but I will eventually.
Yeah. It was probably the Canadian truckers and what they did.
Yeah.
By driving to Ottawa and saying, please lift the mandates.
Yeah.
That generate, people saying, well, how come these truckers who need to be driving to earn a living are prepared to give up their livelihood for days or weeks to demand something? Well, why are they demanding it? What's the problem with that? And then they discover it. There are a lot of local reporters, Facebook, YouTube reporters on that particular thing, which I followed here in the UK. There are quite a few people following it because it was a very interesting experiment. It started almost as a local protest.
Yeah.
And then it got nationwide and it became worldwide. I mean, look what's going on in Holland right now, in the Netherlands, with the farmers who are blocking the freeways in the Netherlands because they are being forced to alter the way that they grow food. Netherlands is one of the world's top food producers. And it does it very intensively because it's a small country, most of which is below sea level, by the way. So they've survived sea level rises. Amsterdam is 6 meters below sea level. It's a lovely city. Go and visit it. It's fantastic. It's got incredible defenses around, which you don't see because you don't need to, but they're there if you're willing to look. So the idea that people are being demonized by being called conspiracy theorists is so wrong. And you said, right, where did the term originate from? It was mid-1960s, the term conspiracy theorist first came to prominence. And the mid-1960s was the time when people had started to look into and investigate the circumstances of the still unsolved murder of John Kennedy, President Kennedy. in November 1963. Now, people will say, well, we saw it on television. No, you didn't see it on television.
No.
You didn't see what they're referring to is the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
Shot by Abraham Zapruder as the president's motorcade passed along Elm Street. Anyway, Dealey Plaza. He was filming with his Super 8 camera.
Yeah.
He then realized the information he had, and his film was sold to Life magazine, who were a prominent photojournalist type magazine at the time. That film did not surface publicly for 10 years after the event, on the grounds it would be too upsetting for people to see their president murdered live on television.
Yeah.
So why was it withheld?
Exactly.
A lot of people started to investigate it. A lot of people started to write books about it, challenging the official narrative. Now, the official narrative was the Warren Commission report into the assassination. Warren was Earl Warren, who was the Chief Justice at the time. So he was a respected figure, one would expect. But people were challenging what he was saying, that it wasn't a single gunman. It wasn't the lone nut gunman that we were told it was, Lee Harvey Oswald. If it was more than one gunman, there was a conspiracy. The evidence would point to the possibility, I'm not saying it's a fact because I don't know, a possibility that someone else was involved. Maybe Lee Harvey Oswald was involved. The point is that a lot of people were writing about this, challenging the official narrative in order to deflect attention from what they were doing. Some very, very good books came out at the time. The CIA, God bless them, the clowns in America, decided that they would use the term conspiracy theorist to deflect attention from these people who are challenging the official narrative. And that's where the term originated from, the mid-1960s, the JFK assassination. But it's now gone into sort of normal parlance. People use the word conspiracy theorist to attack somebody who is challenging the official story, or any story, come to that. You know, whether it's the moon landings or the climate change or any of the other major subjects around at the moment, you know, world poverty. Well, that's a conspiracy theory. Well, no, it's not actually. It's for real. Mm-hmm. But it's because the official narrative wants it. Now, one could say, well, why is the official narrative why is it upheld so strongly? It's upheld by the media.
Yeah.
It's television, newspapers, magazines. Those people, television companies, magazine and book publishers, are beholden to the same people.
Yeah.
who pay for the advertising. Now, who are the main people today paying for advertising? It's the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
70%, or even higher in the cases of specialist magazines, receive their funding, advertising, funding equals advertising, same thing, from the pharmaceutical companies who want to sell their product. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're publishing stuff against the narrative.
Can I go back just for a second? Sure. And couple of things about the JFK assassination. I'm writing about that right now. So I've started a book, the Apollo Moon mission. My third book on the Apollo Moon mission is going to take a couple of years. Yeah. I've got to get through a lot of research. So that's still ongoing, and the research is still going on for that. But I've been reading and documenting, and I've kept in storage a lot of the material I wanted to do for a book that I've been wanting to write for a long time. Now the world is ready for more conspiracy books, and this is going to be, and I've embraced the term conspiracy theorist. I've embraced it. It's this book I'm working on right now, the Apollo, not the Apollo missions. It's a book that'll come out before then. I have most of the research already done. So it's a matter of writing it. I'm still doing some research for it, but 3/4 of the book, the research is finished. So I don't have to go back and do all the research. It's there. I just need to collate it and put it together. So one of the chapters that I'm working on is about the JFK assassination. And so I'm writing about chapter 1 would be our true origins, chapter 2, the JFK assassination, then the Apollo moon missions. I will do an update before the other book on the Apollo missions comes out. I'm also going to get into the Beatles and the possible replacement of Paul McCartney. A lot of people are going to say, "Oh, Randy, what's going on with you? You've gone off the deep end." No, actually, read the book and look at the evidence. And there's some very peculiar thing. Now, I said possible replacement. I didn't say he was replaced. I said possible replacement. I want to look at it and I want to see if there's anything to it. But one thing is for sure when it comes to the Beatles are that they were very deceptive, and a very manufactured group. These were not just four people that came together organically, at least not as far as I'm concerned. There were a lot of events that led up to putting them together and then refining them to what we know of today as the Beatles. And some very interesting connections between their record producer, George Martin, and EMI, which was their recording company, and of course Tavistock, the Tavistock Institute. And there's all kinds of connections through all of them that tie in with the Beatles and other groups, basically of that rock groups of that era in the 60s and even into the 70s. But it's and I'll talk about this in the book. But the Beatles being the most interesting because they were the most popular at the time, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, after that, I'll be getting into 9/11. And then I want to discuss another subject in the book, strange phenomena. And the last chapter I'm looking at right now is the unexplained and very disturbing and peculiar disappearances of people, ships, and planes. And I'm going to be looking in part at the work of David Paulides, who has done some really excellent research. I'll call out to David Paulides. He's done some very, very good research on this, and I'm going to be tapping into some of his work. I'm going to be contacting him as well to discuss some other things with him. But, you know, and there's another good researcher, Marcus, you should watch if you get a chance on the Beatles, and his name is Mike Williams, and his actual YouTube channel is Mike Williams. Paul is Dead. I think that's what it's called, and he also goes by Sage of Quay, and he's done some very. I think he's I could almost say he's done the definitive work on the Beatles. I'll send you a link to his YouTube channel after the call. And there's one very interesting group I want to mention as for the Beatles. I came across this group. Actually, I came across this rock group. They're young and they're in their 20s. I came across this rock group and through Mike Williams and his Sage of Quay YouTube channel. And they're called Famous Groupies. And Famous Groupies is a song that was taken from Paul McCartney and Wings' 1978 album called London Town, for those of you Beatle fans out there who want to look into this. When you listen, I'm going to send you one of their videos as well. When you listen to the lead singer of Famous Groupies, and they model themselves after Paul McCartney. They'll tell you that right on their website. They're all about Paul McCartney and Wings. They duplicate his music from 1970 up to about 1977. It's really amazing. The singer, if you didn't know any better listening to this music and the lead singer specifically, you would think you're listening to Paul McCartney from the 1970s.
Right. Okay.
And there's a connection they talk about, and I think they write it in fictional form. I think that's to cover themselves, but there's a connection between his grandfather, who he credits with writing a lot of the music back then. He credits him with being a ghostwriter. And the insinuation is that he was also a ghostwriter for Paul McCartney and Wings. So this gets very intricate. And I'm going to be talking about this from the Beatles, the early Beatles up to the mid-Beatles, when the change supposedly happened, into the 70s and McCartney's work with Wings. And for all the Beatle fans out there, hey, I like their music. I like their music too, and in fact, one of my favorite albums of the 1970s is Band on the Run by Paul McCartney. I think it was a great album. I'm not disputing that. It's on my shelf right over there. I love that album. I have it on my USB in the car, Band on the Run, Jet. I like that music. I don't like anything he's done after 1980, but I like the music in the 70s. But I'm also realizing now that he may have had a little bit more help in writing and producing that music that he lets on. And he himself, the alleged Paul McCartney, because a lot of people think he's actually Billy Shears, right? Or Billy Williams or whatever, or William Campbell. And I'll get all into that. But there's some consensus, or there's some talk out there that he definitely a good musician. He's demonstrated that. He's got a lot of abilities. And the argument is as well, and I've heard this argument, if people, so you're telling us that Paul McCartney was replaced. And you're telling us that they not only replaced Paul McCartney, they replaced him with a lookalike. They replaced him with a left-handed bass player. They replaced him with somebody who actually almost sounds the same. Oh, come on, Randy. Really? You expect us to believe that? Well, let's remind people of one fact, right? And somebody brought this up recently, and I thought it was a very good fact. If you look at the production of Beatlemania going back to 1979, you remember that Broadway production?
Yeah.
They not only found a person who looked like McCartney, who sang like McCartney, he actually played the same instruments like McCartney, and he was both right and left-handed. So it can be done.
Right. Yeah, can be done.
It can be done. And with all the resources that the Beatles would have had, and basically the Beatles were a corporation, as all rock groups back then were. And I'm not putting the music down. I like the music. My favorite music is classic rock from 1970s. I love classical music too, but I like classic rock.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand, and not you specifically, Marcus, because you know better than anybody. But I say to people, just you need to look into what's really behind it and how it was actually came to being and produced. And I'll stop talking in a second. I just want to go back to JFK. I've already started my chapter on JFK, and you mentioned some of the really good books that were written. And I know you'll know this name when I say it. I'd like you to speak to it. Mark Lane wrote one of the first books on the JFK assassination.
Yes, that was one of the first books that probably created this whole conspiracy theorist, because he was so effective in what he was saying. Because there are so many unanswered questions. I mean, the JFK assassination, for anybody who's like I am, was old enough to be around at the time it happened. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, who I was speaking to when I heard the information on the evening. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening, UK time, when it appeared on UK television. Those little black and white sets we keep hearing about. It appeared on there, and I was just stood stock still, not believing it, because this had never happened before. No, well-known, but quite well-respected, though we found out later that was a bit of a construct, quite well-respected, charismatic leader. He's a young leader who followed Dwight Eisenhower, who was an army commander in World War II. John Kennedy fought in World War II. That's where he injured his back. That's why he had to wear supports on his back.
Yeah.
Painkillers, which affected his behavior in some respects. But he was a respected guy. He was young. He was charismatic. Suddenly he was gone, dead.
Yeah.
And it was a shock. It was a psychic shock throughout the whole, not just the English-speaking world, but the whole world was shocked by what had happened, because this had not happened before. We're used to it now. Assassinations and murders and all that. We're used to it. In the early 1960s, this was very, very unusual. So it was a major shock. And once people got over their shock and started examining the details, they were finding great holes in the story. How could somebody get close enough to be able to do that if the security around the president was as strong as we're told it was? It wasn't strong at all. He was an open-topped car. You don't see the president traveling in an open-top car anymore.
No.
because he was trying to persuade people in Texas. He was in Dallas in Texas. He was trying to persuade Texas to vote Democrat because he was a Democrat. So he wanted to be seen. He wanted to be visible. He was a target. So who, and then people started looking into, well, who would have benefited from it? Well, the most obvious benefit to Kennedy not being there anymore was his vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was a Texan Democrat.
Yeah.
He said. And he benefited enormously from being elevated to the presidency and entered the Vietnam War in a major way. Kennedy wasn't interested, wanted to pull American troops out of Vietnam. He wasn't really interested in committing American troops to yet another war. We'd already had the Korean War about 10 years earlier. Kennedy didn't want America involved in another war. There were many other things he wanted to get America involved in.
Yeah.
Not least of which was a space race. So the Vietnam War was a complete diversion. And one of the very first things that Johnson did after he assumed the presidency was to commit America to the American army into Vietnam. And look at the damage that did. 58,000 Americans died, 3 million Vietnamese died. For what? Who can point to any possible benefit? Oh, it was to stop the spread of communism.
Yeah.
That was it's just so ridiculous. And if you look into the detail, and this is what people were doing, Mark Lane being the first one, there were many others. I think there are about 1,000 books on the Kennedy assassination. But of course, they're all conspiracy theory because they're not the official narrative. Well, now the official narrative, i.e. the Warren Commission report, has been basically dissected to the point where it is irrelevant because it doesn't follow the story correctly. It was 1977, they finally decided to abandon supporting the Warren Commission report. So you've got all this about change, and these people, there's not many of them. As you say, Mark Lane was one. There are probably about 500 or 600 authors who was just stuck at it doggedly. The film by Oliver Stone, JFK, was looking at why, of all the murders that were now publicly visible, why has nobody been prosecuted for it?
That was a brilliant movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He explained the magic bullet theory, the bullet that managed to go through, round, hit about 6 people, and land up on the trolley in the hospital.
Yeah.
They took Kennedy in. Where are the photographs of the autopsy? They've only just surfaced. So all these things are there. And then you look at, well, who would have benefited from Kennedy being out of the picture?
Yeah.
And that points to who the authors of the murder was.
Exactly.
So there's so many stories now, and they were basically trying to keep it under wraps. The CIA were trying to keep under wraps some of the official story that had leaked out. The story about Lee Harvey Oswald visiting the Soviet embassy. The fact that Lee Harvey Oswald but he lived in Russia prior to that, came back with a Russian wife. All right, how many other people did that? That was a very unusual thing to have done, especially being he was military trained, he was a marksman. And he went to Russia in the early 1960s, then came back to America. Didn't anybody keep an eye on him, find out who he was talking to, what he was doing? No. He was considered to be an American citizen, which he was. But could he have had other influences working on him when he was abroad? Maybe we'll never know exactly what they were, because conveniently he was shot before he could be prosecuted by the nightclub owner, Jack Ruby.
Yeah.
Who walked into the Dallas police station unchallenged, pulled out a gun and shot Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Oh, that's convenient. And his excuse was he didn't want to subject Jackie Kennedy to any unpleasant stories or something like that. But that's a bit lame. So there are so many unanswered questions, or conspiracy theories, as people tend to label them, if they don't agree with the actual evidence. But what's the harm in looking at the evidence? It may prove wrong.
I think it's a very good point. All those points that you brought up, very excellent points. There was one interesting thing to the JFK assassination that I'm looking at now is the what I'm starting off in my book in the chapters is that and you don't have to be an investigator to know this, but when you come across a crime scene, and what's the first thing that the investigators do? Well, they tag everything at the crime scene, and then they look at the ballistics, the shots, and how many bullets were fired, and they catalog all that, and then they work their way out to find the assassin or to find a killer. I mean, that's just, to me, standard procedure.
Yeah.
You start with the crime scene and work your way out. That will, the roads will lead to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrators.
Yeah.
But with the Warren Commission, with the JFK assassination, they did it backwards. J. Edgar Hoover had issued an edict, or if not an edict, he certainly made his point very clear to the Warren Commission before the Warren Commission even started its official investigation, that we have to convince the public that Lee Harvey Oswald is the assassin, or we have to convince them beyond to not beyond a reasonable doubt. I think the word he used was, we have to satisfy the public. We have to make sure we convince them, satisfy them, or something in it. He put it that along those lines, that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin. So what they're doing here is that they have their assassin. They're going to work their way in to the ballistics instead of starting with the crime scene and the ballistics and working their way out.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's the angle I'm taking, is that I'm starting with the ballistics. I start with the witnesses right inside Kennedy's limousine. I mean, I'm reading the Warren Commission report right now, and I read it several years ago, and I'm reading it again, and I'm going through, and my eyes have opened more now, because what I'm reading is just like the Warren Commission itself tells you, again, it's in the details. They tell you that there was more going on here. And it was designed in such a way where, and it's a travesty of justice. It really is. It's a tragedy, because what they were doing, you can read it, you can see what they were doing, and that's just in the information that was released to the public. I'm not even talking about the classified information that the public can't see, is that they're even telling you in their official version that, well, yeah, that might be true, but we're going this way, because it doesn't point to Lee Harvey Oswald, right? And for people who have eyes and have discernment, you'll see it easily enough. But a lot of people don't read the Warren Commission report. It's heavy. It's a slog reading it. There's no doubt about that. But if you really want to get serious about it, and you brought up a very good point, 1977, when they abandoned the Warren Commission report, that was with Jimmy Carter, and they brought out the House Assassinations Committee, and they came to a different conclusion, and a lot of people don't roll it. So you have two official versions.
Yeah. Well, one of them's got to be a conspiracy theory, hasn't it? If there are two versions. I mean, you can only have one official version. So you've got this ridiculous story. There's one of the most persuasive books I read was called Mortal Error.
Yes.
I don't remember the author. Where he makes a fairly strong case for it basically being a terrible mistake. That it was because all the bodyguards, the Secret Service, they were all in the car behind Kennedy's.
Yeah.
He was driving a Ford Lincoln. You can see it in the pictures. They're all sitting there brandishing their M16 rifles or whatever, on alert. And of course, as soon as the first bullet goes off, where did that come from? Because the sound echoes around Dealey Plaza. It doesn't come from one direction. It just echoes, and the story goes that one of the Secret Service guys in the car behind Kennedy got up, grabbed his gun, the safety was off, and the gun fired. Not deliberately. And by that 1,000,000 to 1 chance, he hit Kennedy. Now, whether that's true or not, because where's the bullet that entered Kennedy's head? And how did it enter it? I mean, it's one explanation.
Yeah.
And then read the stories of the really skilled marksmen who have tried to replicate the 3 bullets in, was it 8 seconds? 3 bullets in
I think it's 6 seconds.
6 seconds from the Italian bolt-action rifle.
Yeah, that's the Italian Mannlicher, I believe it's called Italian bolt action. Yeah.
Mannlicher Carcano rifle.
Yes, right.
So they're trying to replicate that. 3 bullets in 6 seconds. Obviously, one is up the barrel already.
Yeah.
So that's fired. You've got to then do the bolt, get the other one in, do the bolt, get another one in.
Yeah.
You're 60 foot above the target. And these expert marksmen were not able to replicate it in the time.
Yes.
They could get the 3 bullets off, but not within the time that is supposedly recorded. Because obviously police microphones were recording at the time, and they've taken all those.
Mm-hmm.
So it appears that there is a great deal more to this story, and I'm glad you're writing about it, because it is, as they say, an unsolved mystery.